Hey everyone, welcome back to the special federal election series on the Northern Sentinels podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ayotte. And as you know, I've been speaking with experts during this series to get different perspectives on Canadian national defense. And I am fortunate today to have a returning guest, returning champion, one of our Northern Sentinels from episode 29, Mr. Tim Powers. Tim, welcome back.
29 is a good number. That is the same number, Chris, that Nathan MacKinnon for the Colorado Avalanche wears, a fellow Atlantic Canadian. Much more successful in his life than mine, but I feel honored to be back for a second time.
And you know what? I should not have doubted that you would come back again. Newfoundlander, hard stock. Glad to have you back on the show. So for those that didn't have a chance, Tim, to listen to your episode or any of your shorts, or maybe aren't catching you on Power and Politics on a regular basis, maybe give the listener a little bit of a background as to who you are as it relates to Canadian politics.
So people will have a life, and God bless them. But I'm glad they're listening to the Northern Sentinel podcast, because they should. This is really good and compliments to you and Chris. So my background, I've been involved in federal politics in different capacities for a long time. I would probably be described as hailing from the blue side of the church, the conservative side of the church, but I'm a bit more agnostic these days. I've worked in the Mulroney government as a younger person. I've worked in the Harper campaigns over the last number of years, have done work in the media talking about politics. I have a radio program in Newfoundland on VOCM. And the company I'm chair of is Summa Strategies, and we do a lot of work with military companies and businesses who are advocating for opportunities in the federal government space, both here and elsewhere.
Now, historically in Canada, Tim, how's defense been viewed by the political class? And that can be, any aspect of that. But what is the sort of historical legacy when it comes to defense issues in Canada?
And not to offend any of your peers who have worn a uniform, and thank you for doing that, but it's generally seen as not a vote getter. And that is not because what you have done and what some of the people who are listening to us continue to do, but it is seen as a very specific niche interest issue, a have to if you have to do something about it. And in the election cycle that we're in, for those of us, and I would include myself, who care about the military reinvestment or actual investment, the only thing we may say about what Trump is doing to Canadian politics and global politics is it is forcing people to move the priority of what a military should look like, how we should invest in it, what we should do with it, further up the pole of importance. The last thing I'd say, we're still in a time, though, when affordability, populism, or economic populism, and all those things are there. So it's, as it often is, it's a challenged space. But this election was shocked, actually, to see the current prime minister, defined and styled in the election as the Liberal leader, be one of the first people to come out and talk about an investment in defense and talk about investing in submarines and the like. That's a new one for me. Usually we've talked about jets. Jets have been the hot topic for a quarter of a century, but now we're talking about submarines. Hopefully they'll get better ones than Art Engleton, the former defense minister, bought years and years ago. Those are out in old diesel subs that never worked. But hey, I digress.
Now, with everything going on in the U.S., which I think most of us are captivated by for a whole bunch of reasons, do you think that this truly does change the political class's approach to how they're going to deal with defense issues in the future?
I don't know about in the future, but in the short to medium term, if it is the lifespan of Donald Trump and also the aggressions of Vladimir Putin and the uncertainty of what China may be intending to do. But there's a confluence of circumstances that have all of those things making policymakers and the public, because the public is now hearing more about it, jump into understanding that we are woefully negligent when it comes to what we have done or not done on the defense front. So I think I would describe it, Chris, as a short to medium term opportunity that may turn into a long term opportunity.
I don't know if you've done any polling on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, if I get the name wrong. Is it Abacus? Is your team? Yeah, I don't know if Abacus has looked at this specific issue in any of their polling to get a sense of how interested Canadians are and how supportive they are in terms of greater defense investment.
I think we did something a while ago. I don't think we've done anything over the course of this campaign, but certainly in the last number of months, as the discussion about what, are we going to meet our NATO GDP commitments and the like, we've done some general polling on that. And if I remember correctly, it's usually more kind of favorable to doing something, but that's not surprising because Canadians themselves tend to be dutiful, law-abiding, rule-following, team-playing type people. So if we're being told by the rest of the world we need to meet the 2% target, now potentially the 5% target, but who knows what it actually really will be, that we should do it. So there's not vast opposition that I've seen to it, but the problem is there's, again, on that pole of the hierarchy of needs, if you want to get all Maslowian, it's not there in a place where if you said, should we invest in doctors or should we invest? Binary choices get made or framed. So generally a positive feeling about investing in defense, but not a deep penetrating feeling about investing in defense given the other fiscal priorities that are there.
How are you reading, and this is a bit of a crystal ball question, but that's okay. You're sharp. You'll be able to give me something
Donald
on
Trump,
this.
Though, Chris. I mean, my tariffs would have worked, but go ahead.
So the whole idea of flooding the zone down in the U.S. with just pushing so much information, misinformation into the public sphere, I think a lot of people are understandably challenged about to understand, like, what exactly is the issue? And do you get a sense, or maybe I'll reframe that, where do you think that Canada's sort of lack of commitment to defense or our laggard status of in defense, however you want to measure it, whether you measure it by GDP, whether you measure it by NORAD, doesn't really matter. But any sense of like how central that issue is, or if it's just another one of these things that's being thrown at the wall in all of the chaff that's being spit out there to flood the zone?
I think it's something that's thrown at the wall. I think we've been guilty of complacency because of adjacency, not to turn it into a Polyev-like rhyme, but because of our geographic adjacency to the United States. I think Canadians probably have, Canadians not military, but people, the average Canadians probably thought, the Americans are never going to let anything happen to us. Yeah, we can get away with not spending too much money. I think maybe they've seen some signs before Trump even of the need to do a bit better. The famous balloons of a couple of years ago that were coming across the border. I think the stories of our equipment not working, I think people find that embarrassing, our jets being 40, 50 years old. But their engagements with those things are temporary and not sustaining. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I think it's a bunch of those things at play.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from you is that unless there's truly an existential moment for Canadians, I mean, it might increase in interest, but it's never going to supersede a lot of the core things that Canadians are always going to the ballot box about. And I think that makes, that probably makes pretty good sense. Where in your estimation, so notwithstanding the fact the electorate sort of sees it that way, what's the level of responsibility of the elected official to look maybe beyond the ballot box question, if that ever, and that might just be an absolutely hilarious question, but the level of responsibility to be the person to look at these types of issues and say, I know it's not necessarily a vote getter, but we are in a really bad situation right now, whatever it might be. Defense is the topic of this, but is that ever a compelling narrative in the political class, or is that just something that is so adorable that it's not even worth entertaining?
What, are you suggesting the public good could outdo the shiny bauble of the politics of the moment?
I would never suggest that.
I know. Well, look, I come from a time where I would like to believe, and I still do, in altruism and making important choices that may not be as popular with some people now for the greater safety and security of Canada. And look, I think there are politicians and people seeking office who know that and who continue to make that point. But it's not being done en masse to have the outcome that I think we would like to see. I think, to go back to your point a few moments ago, when we were in the war in Afghanistan, and we saw the images from Afghanistan, and we lost 153 Canadians in Afghanistan, and saw the flag-draped coffins come home. We had it was the horror of that conflict, the human cost of that conflict that made it easier at that time, if you remember, to procure some things. But we shouldn't need the visuals of war and Canadians sacrificing in war to create a national moment where our investments need to improve. But sadly, I think, look at the height, Rick Hillier, who you and I both know, obviously comes from my home province of Newfoundland. He was well known nationally at that time. He was as well known, arguably, as the prime minister of the day, because he was thrust front and center. He used the opportunity, I mean this in the very best of ways, to try and make the case for military and reinvestment in protecting the soldiers. But we've not seen, and I'm sure they've tried, anybody command the stage and be able to make the arguments in a normal, consumable human way about why this matters. And that is an unfortunate thing. We hear politicians making these arguments from time to time. We see retired generals called out to make these arguments, but they are important, but they're not hooking with the public, though the public good portion of what they are saying is still vital.
So my last question for people in this series has been, if you had a few minutes with the PM, how would you convince him about this, to move this issue forward? But maybe I'll take a little bit of a different approach here. So if I had a few minutes with the PM and you're my political advisor, and you're saying, okay, this is, you want to
right off the bat there, Chris. But anyway, go ahead. Let's say you have a better advisor. I'm just a Yahoo.
Okay, that's fair. Let's say I got a better advisor. How would you suggest those of us that see the importance in this issue should be addressing this to political decision makers? What is the sort of the most compelling argument for this?
I think you need to tie it into a narrative of general safety and security that people are seeming more anxious about now. So far in this election campaign, you've seen a good degree of talk about safety at home, particularly as it relates to policing, investment, and the like. But safety at home starts with the ability to defend oneself abroad and reinforce efforts at home. A lot of the threats that comes on our shores comes from afar. If we are going to become more independent, just building off of these themes, one of the great response narratives that we're hearing is we need to be more independent. We need to be less reliant on the United States. Well, that is true whether our relationship with the United States improves or not. And I think to have that independence, to have the ability to protect that independence, to create investment in that independence, you need to opt the investment for the Canadian military to a significant degree. And I think there's an appetite for that. I think people at some level understand the threats are from non-state actors and state actors. So I would link them to what the debates are about now and where you sit. I think the problem that it's not just the military, but others make is it's about me. And here's why you have to invest in me. And me. It's about how you're the we. And the other thing I would do is, how do you tell the public story? Because what you're finding now with political parties is they want you, if they're going to partner with you in investment, telling the story about why this matters. I mean, the other great angle, of course, which was the sales pitch behind the shipbuilding that's been done recently in Canada, is, well, it's going to create economic opportunity at home. We're going to, reinvigorate our great shipbuilding programs of the past. So I think there's lots of ways you can go, but you have to put it in the dialogue that's happening on the common ground where all of the decision makers are at the moment. And always be adjusting to that, always adding a layer to your story, is because the common ground is going to change, but you always have to have a role on that common ground. So how do you stay contemporary with that?
Tim Powers, thanks again for being back on the show and being part of this special federal election series on the Northern Sentinels podcast.
Chris, great to be with you and great work you're doing, and I hope the listeners enjoy it.